The 1970s were a time of activism and change. Out of the controversy came a little book with a big impact.
Well, the early history of Our Bodies, Ourselves is a wonderful story. A group of women met at one of the early women's liberation conferences in Boston, Massachusetts, and they started talking about the hot health topics of the day. They continued to meet after the conference in the spring of 1969 because they wanted to put together a good doctors list for the Boston area. And they quickly discovered they didn't have that kind of knowledge that would enable them to judge doctors. So they embarked upon this process of self-education. They went to the local Harvard Medical Library. They talked to the doctors that were willing to speak with them and nurses as well. And they started gathering a lot of wonderful information and met in groups and began to share the factual information, adding their own personal stories. They started some community courses, women's health and sexuality courses. And as more and more people wanted to be part of these courses or teach them themselves, they decided to put together some written materials. Eventually it became the first edition in late 1970 called Women in Their Bodies, put out by the New England Free Press. In early 71, the book became known as Our Bodies, Ourselves, and through word of mouth, about 250,000 copies were sold.
And it was as if we were just sort of discovering what our needs were as women and reclaiming or claiming for the first time just a woman-centered view of our bodies, ourselves, and our lives. And it seems so simple and so basic, but it was so profound.
Despite the hunger for the information, Our Bodies, Ourselves faced rigid opposition to its frank and informed discussion of women's health and sexuality.
In the late 70s, under the spearhead of Jerry Falwell, he had written a letter in his newsletter saying the book was obscene trash and it was disgusting and it needed to be banned immediately from all schools and from all libraries and any places the courses was being taught. And so there became a flurry of backlash, throughout the country really.
Even with attempts to ban the book, Our Bodies, Ourselves has made itself a household name.
Many women have a copy of the original Our Bodies, Ourselves on their bookshelf. Since its first publication 28 years ago, more than 4 million copies have been sold.
Our Bodies, Ourselves, a book by and for women, a comprehensive work containing detailed information from taking care of ourselves to sexual health and fertility to growing older.
It's a radical statement when it was first published nearly 30 years ago. Before then, women had no place really to turn for direct and complete information about how their bodies worked and about their unique needs. Even today, there's probably no more comprehensive single resource like it.
Over the years, they have taken on such hot topics as the right to safe and legal abortions, the dangers of breast implants, the targeting of women by tobacco companies, as well as a wide range of other issues, from sexuality to nutrition to aging. Through their persistence in advocating for women, Our Bodies, Ourselves has made itself an ingrained part of the culture.
Our Bodies, Ourselves. Good book. Oh, you've read it? I own it.
This was it. The last night of summer.
Holy cow. Try not to drool it, okay? If Karen finds out I have this, she'll kill me.
Despite the media attention, the publications remain the core way that Our Bodies, Ourselves seeks to inform and empower women.
I first saw a tattered copy of Our Bodies, Ourselves in my roommate's book collection in college. It was just on her bookshelves, and I pulled it out and was like, "What is this?" I'm like, "Wow, this is cool!" All this, I have a vagina.
I started working on reproductive health and sexuality in 2001 in New Delhi, India. And Our Bodies, Ourselves, the 1998 edition, was one of the first books that was handed over to me by my trainer and supervisor. And I remember my supervisor coming to me and saying, "If you know this book, you'll be fine."
My mom always had it in the house and she showed it to me at a very young age.
The experience with the book was in the 1970s when this book came in English. And I read it. I read some of the parts in English. I had no idea that they had done, that it has been translated into different languages.
I was in the Peace Corps in Mongolia, and there's this library that all volunteers kind of, whenever they get books, they dump the books off in that library, and people can just kind of exchange books, and as the years goes on, the library gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And one day I was just going through the library looking for just fun reads that I could take back with me to read at my site when I was bored, and I saw a copy of Our Bodies, Ourselves. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I might be able to actually use that for some of my work there. So I picked up the book and started thumbing through it, and it looked like a great book for purposes other than just dietary nutrition stuff, and so I took it back to site with me.
The other thing about the book that has been a real hallmark of every single book we've done is that it combines personal experiences of women with the best evidence we've garnered from research, from population-based studies, from epidemiology. It's drawn from the best literature and provided women with factual information as well as personal experiences.
People's stories about their health or their experiences with their body is a very powerful way of teaching, I think.
The pictures of the different women, you know, pictures of women that were enjoying themselves, pictures of women that were happy about talking about the stories also. I like the stories. I remember reading the stories.
I felt weird because as a woman with a disability, I had to explain what my sexual needs were to anyone I wanted to sleep with, until I realized that everyone has to explain what their needs are in order to get them met.
I came away convinced that a simple mastectomy was the only sensible treatment. Then I went to Boston for a second opinion. It turned out that the other side was equally convincing. I felt like a statistic being wooed by both sides.
I had a home birth, and choosing this was never a question for me. I knew in my bones and flesh that this was the way I needed to approach my pregnancy and birth. I would have my baby in the warmth of my home.
I think it's made for everybody, and I think if you're 15 and you look at it, or if you're 21 and look at it, I think you feel the same level of comfort. It's people like yourself, so you don't have to feel a threat of that it's going to be too advanced or you're not going to understand it. It answers the questions that you needed to answer.
This book was written by women, for women, and about women, and that I like very much.
The organization is committed to broadening its vision, increasing the diversity of the voices in the book and on the board and staff. To reach out to even more women, the Global Translation and Adaptation Program was created.
I now work with the Global Translation and Adaptation Program, and in some ways I feel like I've come full circle because my work or my program works with women's groups in other parts of the world as they translate and culturally adapt Our Bodies, Ourselves for their own communities. And I remember growing up in India, the book Our Bodies, Ourselves was not available. It was not something that you could go into a bookstore and buy. So I feel in many ways that doing what I do, I'm actually helping, sort of fulfill a wish.
Up until now, the book has been published in 20 languages, and there are 7 new editions on the way. But what may be more important than the print books themselves is the way that women's groups are using them for community education, influencing policy, bridging ethnic divides, and basically changing social attitudes on women's bodies, health, and sexuality. For example, our partner group in Nigeria is reaching about 500,000 women with simple health messages on posters and stickers that have been introduced into the canoe transportation system. And in Israel, Palestinian and Israeli women are working together to produce both Arabic and Hebrew editions of the book. And at the same time that they're developing the book, they are drawing content from it to produce position statements on women's health, which they've already introduced to the Israeli government. In Japan, the translation team there was so dissatisfied with particular words in the Japanese language for various parts of women's anatomy, because these words were strongly associated with shame and shadiness. So they coined new words, and these words have much more positive associations, and we've since learned that these new words have made it into the newest Japanese dictionaries. So we are having an international impact, and our Global Translation Adaptation Program gives day-to-day support and technical assistance to make sure that these innovative projects succeed.
Another program is the Latina Health Initiative, which is specifically designed to focus on the needs and health education of the Latina community. Its goal is to provide opportunities for outreach, prevention, awareness, and network building in Spanish-speaking communities.
When we talk about Latin American culture, we talk about many cultures. Each country has its own culture, right? So it's going to be a monumental but an interesting and challenging task to produce, I hope, the next version of this book.
The initiative has also completed a Spanish-language version of The Journey to Parenthood, a guide through pregnancy, birth, and beyond. This guide helps families make informed choices about pregnancy and childbirth, as well as providing a wealth of important and helpful knowledge. In addition, Our Bodies Ourselves works with Teen Voices, a magazine for teenagers by teenagers to help provide accurate and helpful health information. The book, Our Bodies Ourselves, has never gone out of print, selling over 4 million copies since its first publication in 1970. Over 3 decades later, the need for resources like Our Bodies Ourselves has not lessened.
We have a whole new generation of people coming along, and I think that it's been a source of comfort. So I think that what you do is what you should continue to do, because we obviously need it.
One of the goals we have for the organization, founders and current board and staff, is to make sure that we pass the torch. Very soon, the total leadership of this organization will be in the hands of younger women who are not founders of the organization. And that's a very exciting moment to see an organization survive that transition.
My children were growing up. I made sure I always had a new edition, the newest edition on the bookshelf. I always left it in a place that they could be exposed to it, both my sons and my daughters.
Gave my mother a copy of Ourselves Growing Older, which is the book for older women. And then I gave my daughter a copy of the Teen Our Bodies Ourselves.
As an RA in a college, I think it's very helpful because it's a resource that a lot of people know and trust, and so I always have it in my room.
I just heard about our partners in Nepal who have this year, along with a lot of other NGOs, partner NGOs, they've actually been able to facilitate the inclusion of reproductive health and rights in their country's new constitution. So these are very tangible examples of how the book has empowered.
I think there are generations of women who have had access to our book, and that's more than 4 million women in this country and in other countries, who will have the encouragement from the book to think seriously about our health and about our role in our health care in terms of how we take care of ourselves, in terms of being partners in our health care instead of just taking what a doctor or what a hospital or now it's the HMOs tell us, being more vigorous and more assertive in getting the care we want and in looking at what the medications that we are encouraged to take, in asking who makes money from these medications and what are the more healthful ways perhaps of finding healing for ourselves.
We've never taken any money from any pharmaceutical companies or any profit-making institutions at all. And so, in fact, although we have translations, foreign adaptations, it's known throughout the world, the organization still struggles because to survive. It's so important that this set of values and this perspective, continue. Now it's appealing to more than electronic, as a blog, a lot of the materials on the internet. We've expanded and grown in so many ways to reflect the new ways that information is being shared. But we consistently have a critical perspective on all kinds of information with no profit-making bias at all in order to really give women the tools to live as healthy and fulfilled life as possible.
The impact of Our Bodies Ourselves has been recognized and applauded from the advent of the organization. The many praises, awards, and thankful readers have cemented Our Bodies Ourselves' reputation as a trustworthy resource and staunch advocate for women's health.